Good afternoon, everyone. Dear ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's a pleasure to welcome you all here and thank you for Qatar Debate and Informal Logic for bringing us together in this wonderful session. Today's paper is presented by Mr. Ronnie Yehia Haidar, and he is a PhD candidate at Argumentation Studies at the University of Windsor in Canada. And Mr. Ronnie researches focuses in legal argumentation and international human rights law with a strong interest in critical approaches to the global legal system. And we are so happy that he is one of our fellow in the second cycle of Qatar Debate Fellowship program. Joining me in welcoming Ronnie to the stage to present his paper. And my friend, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining me today. Before I begin, I would like to thank Daifallah for that very nice introduction, as well as Qatar Debate for all their hard work in putting this conference together. And I'm humbled and grateful to have the opportunity to have my work published in the Informal Logic Journal. I'm excited to be discussing the fascinating world of international law. International law is becoming a very popular field, and a field that's maturing a great deal, but it still comes with a lot of complexity and comes with a lot of growth that still needs to be done. So as you can see from the screen, today we're going to be talking about international law in argumentation, navigating constraints, and seeking new orientation. So, international law as an argumentation practice is going to be our launching point. This isn't anything that is too controversial anymore. International law and argumentation, being an argumentation practice, is pretty well received and accepted around the world. But what is often debated, and where there's still a lot of dialogue, is what is the true purpose of international law? What does it seek to do? And there's an ongoing debate among scholars about what is this true purpose. Some say it's to legitimize legal facts. So it's to take ideas and take traditions and perspectives and make them official laws, make them treaties and concrete principles and policies that nation states have to follow. Others say it's to persuade state actors so that state actors can follow a particular perspective. I have a different perspective, and I follow the perspective of a German argumentation scholar named Harold Warlap, and we're going to be talking about his framework. But essentially at its core, he's talking about acquiring new orientations. And a lot of interesting features that I think are great for international law is his commitment to validity over assent, his introduction to mid-range universality, and perhaps the most important in this context is this idea of frames and how to use them responsibly. Another area of my work that I'm excited to share with you is is connecting different perspectives of international law. Most specifically for the purposes of this presentation, an area called TWAIL, Third World Approaches to International Law. And finally, we're going to take a case study, and we're going to apply Warlap's argumentation framework while also responsibly integrating the TWAIL perspective to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So, we'll go very quickly about international law. I'm sure a lot of you know what it is and what it entails, but I'll just have international law 101. This is what when I mean international law, this is what I mean. According to the United Nations, which is the main entity that deals with and promotes international law, is the definition is the legal responsibilities of states in their conduct with each other and the treatment of individuals within states. So essentially, how nation states interact and deal with one another, but also how they deal with us, the people that live and operate and work and call these different nation states their home. Their jurisdiction is widespread, from human rights to migration, to sustainable development, to outer space, to the oceans. Their jurisdiction is very, very comprehensive. And like I mentioned earlier, the main institution is the United Nations. And then they have these mechanisms where international law comes to life, where it functions, where it becomes an organism that people can deal with and can allow to grow. And those are through things like the international criminal courts, like the International Criminal Court of Justice, or international treaties like the one that we'll be speaking today about climate control. And of course, the Security Council that, again, shows the impact of international law. As I mentioned earlier, there's two main perspectives of the function of international law. So I use the work of Marty Costamimi, and he says that international law centers on the persuasion of target audiences, be it nation states, be it the courts, be it international legal colleagues. But he says for international law to really be accepted and to really, and the arguments to really be applied, it has to go through what he calls the invisible college of international lawyers. So an argument is not really well perceived as being persuasive or accepted unless an invisible college of international lawyers, so a collection and audience of international lawyers, accept said argument. And then he doesn't talk too much about what is a good legal argument. He talks about what isn't a good legal argument. And he says, it is not a strong moral point, it is not a plausible political position, nor is it about convincing sociological description. And then you find out through his work that he believes that for a persuasive argument to be true, it must have two important characteristics, being normative and concrete. So what is normative? Essentially, normative is not going to a nation state and telling them what you're doing is wrong or what you're doing is right. It's telling them through a roundabout way about how they should act. We do this all the time. Sometimes a teacher will tell a student, not that you're being a bad student, but they'll say a good student will hand in their homework on time every single day, right? And what that does is it allows that student to think, well, I want to be a good student. And then in real time, they reflect on their work and say, but I'm not submitting my work on time, so therefore I might not be a good student, right? This is what normative argument does. It tells the countries or nation states in a way about the standards or about the practices of good nation states. They reveal a stark contrast with the nation states' actions. It gives them a time and an opportunity to reflect on what they're doing. And then also an opportunity to return to the principles that make a good international legal order. Concreteness is the other side of the coin, right? You don't want to be too vague and abstract. You also want to give concrete examples or concrete arguments to your audience so that they know exactly what you're talking about. And this is what Costamimi is talking about here is the direct facts to international life. Right? So the principles of the international legal order. This helps nation states know that these are rules that are in place and that you have to follow said rules. These are arguments that are being set forth, and these are the arguments that have to be accepted. So it is a marriage between these two themes that gives Costamimi his idea of a persuasive argument. Obviously, I can't go into too much of this in my work, but if in my presentation rather. But in my work, if you read it, I talk about some of what I believe are some of the limitations. Very quickly, for Costamimi is he has these ideas of standards and these ideas of legal policies and principles. My big question is, whose legal principles? Whose rules? International law is very diverse in their perspective. So for you to create an international standard on justice, whose justice is it? Whose perspective of justice is it? So those are just some of the ideas that I push back on Costamimi's work, and obviously I'm more expansive about it in my work. On the other side of the coin, you have somebody named Hart who talks about law being a very robust legal system. Okay? It's about rules and the management of these rules in a very, very tight-knit operative system. And he divides the rules into two categories: primary rules and then secondary rules. Primary rules are very simple. The nation states can and cannot do certain things, right? So here's a very popular one. According to the Conventions on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, Article 4 says, state parties undertake to ensure and promote the full realization of all human rights and fundamental freedoms for all people with disabilities without discrimination of any kind on the basis of disability, right? Very, very clear on what nation states should do in response to those members of their nation state that have a disability, and they should not be discriminated against in any under any circumstance. Secondary rules are essentially how rules are made. Okay, so you have these primary rules that people follow. Okay, but how are they made? How are they modified? What if there's a rule that is not functioning the way that it should? There should be a mechanism where you can critique said rule, you can modify said rule, you can upgrade or you can enhance said rule. That's like the UN Charter. The UN Charter is very specific on how nation states can create rules. And again, international law is very different than different types of law, more specifically state or domestic law. And in my paper, if you would like to read it, I have a whole section that talks about the differences. But one of the biggest fascinating features about international law is it's completely horizontal. The nation states create the laws, and then they're expected to follow the laws. In state law, it's different. You have courts that create the law, and you have the people that follow the law. So it's very, very unique. So those are two perspectives that I have about that I incorporate about what is the true purpose of international law. And now I'd like to integrate some of the work of Harold Warlap. His main focus of what argumentation should be is about gaining and establishing orientation. Each of us in this room have a different orientation. And it's that orientation that makes us behave a certain way, to view the world a certain way, and to create certain arguments that propel our orientation. Argumentation, he believes, is about validating theses that have not yet become knowledge. And that's where argumentation comes about. You have these different theses that are just ideas and they're not fully formed, and you have argumentation that allows for these to become accepted knowledge. Like I mentioned earlier, some of his most interesting features are one of them being validity. So validity is, he defines, the quality of a conclusion acknowledged in the form of conveying and or consolidating as a result of objection-free justification, insights into a domain in question, and thus suitable a new orientation for action in this domain. I know that's a mouthful, so I'll break it down very quickly, and I'll try to extract two very quick main points that really fascinated me. Number one is an objection-free justification. For something to be accepted, it must have no more objections. So it goes through various courses of argumentation until there is no objection. A second thing that he incorporates is this idea of a marketplace. And I love that idea that there's this lively marketplace where arguments are exchanged between parties. And he explains this metaphorical marketplace, and he says that it doesn't operate autonomously, right? It requires us, legal, or in the case of international law, legal agents, but in the cases of non-international legal forms, is active participation, right? It's alive, it's an organism, it's dynamic, it encourages people's participation, and that is one of the biggest bases of successful international legal order, active participation. Active participation on each in each category, us the people, our state officials, the nation states as themselves. And it's a very, very, I think, responsible view of encouraging the dynamic nature of argumentation. Mid-range universality is also a very, very important topic that he includes in his work. And essentially, it is the middle ground. It is the middle ground between these two positions of validity, these two classes. Class one is local validity. So those are the people that have engaged with an argument, right? So if I'm presenting an argument about international legal order, right, it's the people that have been engaged in it, have had have been a part of the process of progressing that argumentation along. But there's also universal validity that suggests that a certain principle holds true for all human beings, irrespective of their understanding of the argument and their involvement with it. Again, this is very, very important for international law, because we as the people, we don't really have the engagement of international law directly, yet a lot of these legal policies apply to us directly. Okay, for frames, what Warlap includes here is, I'm sure you've all seen this rabbit-duck illusion. Just by a show of hands, how many people see a duck? And how many people see a rabbit? And how many people see a car? Okay, good, there's no car in here, okay? Right, but what he does is he includes this to show frames. Right? So for all the people that said that they see a duck, imagine having a conversation with somebody who sees a rabbit. And you say, wow, that beak is very sharp. And the person looks at you and says, beak, what are you talking about? Those are clearly ears, right? That's where frames come in. And he introduces this concept of latent frames. So the frame that you don't see. And then you have this conversation, rather you engage in this act of argumentation, and you realize that you're talking past one another, right? Dr. Tyndall talked about ethno-argumentation yesterday, and I thought that was fascinating, talking about what voices are heard and what are silenced. And I would like to very modestly interject and say, well, Warlap says that there are instances where people are talking in different frame dialects, right? They're talking past each other because I'm not understanding the frame of which you see international legal order. And that's especially important to international law, because you have 170 plus countries that are part of the legal order, all presenting their frames in real time for one another to accept it. Now, you don't have to be ignorant to your frame forever. Just because you see a duck the first time doesn't mean you have to see a duck for the rest of your life, right? You can see the rabbit, and just because you see the rabbit now doesn't mean that the duck disappears. What happens is there's this Rolodex of frames. You can shift between which frame that you put, and then he talks again, in my work I expand, he talks about prioritizing certain frames for certain circumstances, right? If we're talking about the duck, then it's important for you to put that as the main frame through our discussion, right? But then you can revert back to the rabbit when you're talking to somebody else about the rabbit. So it's very, very interesting, but frames are essentially what allows us the confidence to create inferences and to make arguments about certain subjects. You cannot responsibly make an argument, whether it's in international law or anywhere in any discipline, without understanding the frames of those that you're engaging in argumentation. Again, I can't stress this enough, and this is something that I truly appreciate about Warlap's work. It's this concept of talking past each other. And I think a lot of us are guilty of talking past one another because we're not understanding each other's frames, okay? So before I go into the case study and wrap up, like I said, I try to incorporate a concept of, I'm not a TWAIL scholar, but I'm learning about this field. But essentially, TWAIL is a scholarly and critical movement that emerged in the 1990s in response to the perceived Eurocentralism and neocolonialism in mainstream international law. It shifts, even though it's related, but it shifts the terminology from third world countries or periphery countries to the global south. Now, mind you, they're all cousins of one another. And they're essentially, and there's different fields or different interpretations of TWAIL, but they're the regions outside of Europe and North America. They're usually, and not always, low income and often politically or culturally marginalized communities or nation states. This shift is not from the culture, not so much from the differences of incomes, but more so about the differences in the geopolitical relationships of power, and also includes cultural differences of all these different states. It's a very unique perspective and lens to apply in international law. TWAILers are analytical about how current and contemporary international law exploits the global south, and the policies run deep. And it's very important to marry your analysis with historical context as well. So let's talk a little bit about my my case study, and then I'll wrap up for the afternoon. So the case study that I chose is a very common one: the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC. Article 2 is very, very clear, and it kind of summarizes what the focus of this convention is. It is to stabilize gas concentration at a level that it will not produce and at least prevent dangerous interference caused by humans, right? So it doesn't give a specific number, but it says we have to reduce our greenhouse gas concentrations in a way so that it will not harm the environment. So then the Paris Agreement is this forum where many nation states came together and they wanted to make it more concrete. Okay, so what is this reduction of greenhouse emissions, and can we assign a number to it? So they did. They said that they're going to limit the increase of global temperatures to well under 2 degrees Celsius, right? And in a perfect world, restrict the rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And then they told all the nation states to go back and do homework. And that homework was to create nationally determined contributions, NDCs. What is your country going to do within its borders to ensure that we as an entire civilization can reduce our gas concentrations to the levels of 1.5 degrees Celsius? The report was, when these countries came back with their completed homework, if they were to accept their contributions, they would lead to a warming of 2.7%. So it would be above the threshold. So again, through the lens of TWAIL, we're going to go very quickly through the Warlap framework. Before I do that really quickly, these are some other features that TWAIL scholars have said and critiqued about this convention. Number one, there's a feature called carbon trading, where you can exchange credits between different countries, enabling countries in global north countries to continue to do work that emits more greenhouse gases because they were able to get credits from different countries. Another feature is called CDM, or Clean Development Mechanism, where nation states that have the money, most so in the global north, can go into global south countries and lead or champion a project that reduces the emissions in that particular area, but take it as their credit. So it's an opportunity for a global north country to go into a global south country and say, look, we need to reduce our credits. We need to reduce our greenhouse gases. We've tried everything, but we're going to go into another nation state, complete a project there, and then we're able to use that credit for our work. So, and then finally, there's this theme of common but differentiated responsibility. That is, different nation states have different opportunities. And therefore they have different historical and economic and opportunities, and therefore their approach to this is a little bit different. So I'll end with really quickly with the Warlap, the framework. So first he talks about orientation. Orientation within this context is pretty clear. You have different countries that have different orientations and different orientations to climate control. And therefore, during the negotiation process, there has to be an open forum where these orientations are exchanged between one another. Number two is validity. Validity is crucial, especially when we're talking about climate change. It needs to be based on facts and scientific research. We can't talk about what is popular or what is accepted. It has to be on validity, and this gives nation states credibility. And then frames, obviously that's really, really important too, because you have different nation states that are discussing climate change through a different frame of one another, and therefore talking to one another. And you have to realize that there are dominant frames and more and less dominant frames, and therefore if the dominant frame is continued to prevail without the other frames being incorporated, then they can do harm, and they're not going to agree with one another. And then mid-range universality is about finding the middle ground, especially with climate change, because it affects the people, the people that are a part of nation states, as well as the nation states themselves. So making sure we have that balance to really spark the participation as well as the acceptance of this of climate change. I'll end with this. Warlap is, I believe, a practical way of looking at the various instruments of international law, which ultimately helps us with our true purpose of what we're trying to do, and that's to understand the roles and impacts of international law, and specifically the instruments of international law being the treaties or the agreements. By using this approach, we can navigate the complexities of international law more effectively, all considering different perspectives and legal traditions. Ultimately, Warlap's framework enhances our grasp of legal instruments and encourages a richer conversation in the field of international law, which is our, I believe, desire for all of us to make sure that we have a more diverse and a more inclusive world. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ronnie, for this stimulating talk. Thank you so much. Now, I'll try to keep my comment very short so I can allow to more questions and comment from our guest here. First of all, Ronnie has introduced us to the work of Warble, and whose theory is in argumentation, and which is not used as much in legal field, especially in international law, and that alone, I think it's a valuable contribution. It pushes us to think about how law, not only a system of rules or a tool for persuasion, but it as a way for states to build shared understanding, what we call orientations. So I would say here, there is some reflection and some question that I need to raise, that I'm curious about how we could apply this theory in practice. This can shape how international law, international negotiating are structured, how we can build in practice for reflecting on different frames in theory making. And I think there is a lot of potential here, especially in conflict resolution or climate diplomacy, but I would love to see how it develop further. And also, I want to gently push back on the underlying assumption in this paper that better understanding between countries will naturally lead to better cooperation. And that sometimes true, but not always, because there are a power of dynamics, historical injustice, and strategic interest and at play. And in some cases, disagreement is not a misunderstanding, it's a clash of goals. So the model may need to account for non-cooperative too. And also for the future, I think we need this model in other law field and domains, and combine it with discourse analysis afterward to track the argumentation, and explore whether the UN bodies could pilot an open forum segment to imply that world dialogical ideal. And I think overall, Ronnie papers pursued us that international law can be more than enforcement and persuasion, and it can be for meaning making among diverse actors, and that I think it's very inspiring. Thank you so much, Ronnie. I really appreciate it. And I'll open the board for anyone who have questions or comment that gonna raise for Ronnie. Yes. Okay. Go ahead. Start, please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, sir. Mine is not a question, it's just like a comment and a feedback. I want to say thank you for an amazing session. I've really learned a lot. And one of the things I'm holding dearly to my heart and I'm taking home is that we need to learn to say things from others' perspective and also respect their opinions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comment, questions? Okay, go ahead.
Hello, thank you so much for this amazing workshop. And in my opinion, the climate change issue is a bit exaggerated. And I say that while still searching for the truth. So it's not a fact, it's my opinion. I sometimes feel it's being used as a political tool against the countries that they are producing the oil. So, but when they actually cut the production, they are accused of starting an economic war. So they are telling the Arab countries or the GCC countries, you need to reduce oil producing, okay, because you are accused climate change issue. But when we start reduce the oil production, they are telling us that no, you are starting economic war. You need to increase the oil production. So this is, it seems for me, that sounds like a form of hypocrisy to me, especially since some of the same countries continue to produce coal, which is even more harmful than the oil. So yeah, and I want to end my opinion with the sentence. In Arabic, we call it شريعة الغاب القوي يفعل ما يريد. It is the law of the jungle. The strong do whatever they want. So the powers speak. So it is a very controversial topic if the international law is a law or not. But actually, on my opinion, it is not a fact. I'm still searching for the right opinion. The powers speak. The powers speak. So if the international law, it's this much of powerful, so all the world will be in peace. Thank you so much for this amazing workshop.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Any other question and comment over here or here? Let's see here. Okay. Yeah.
Did you want me to respond to that first?
Yes. Okay.
Or did you want me
at the end?
at the end? Okay.
Oh, yes. Okay, go ahead, please.
Ronnie, thank you. I was wondering about the issue of validity and this mid-range validity. And I was thinking in those cases in which you have different frames to the dominant frames that are at the same time pretty local in the sense of the validity. So for example, indigenous communities that argue in their own way, usually narrative way, against coal miners or any mining activity in their lands. Is international law a way of gaining some more mid-range validity for this kind of communities, or is that not the function or a function of international law? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, any other question? Last one, so we can have time for Ronnie to answer all the questions. Any other comments? Or we have one here. The last one. Okay, let's finish with this. Thank you.
Hi everyone, thank you. I liked your comments about climate change being a tool, and I want to step back and look at the bigger picture. Climate change, while scientifically real, is often politicized and weaponized, especially against oil-producing nations. When these countries exercise economic sovereignty, like reducing oil production, it's framed as an attack on global warfare. But this is not, or like economic warfare, but this is not about the planet, it's about power, like you said, which I love the Arabic phrase. And climate discourse becomes noise, just like, performative gender equality, white feminism, and pinkwashing, and so on. So convenient narratives that drown out the realities of war, genocide, and systemic oppression. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. And Ronnie.
Thank you very much for your questions and your comments. I really appreciate your comments. I'll try to go through them systematically, and please let me know if I forgot something. I'll actually start on the end where you talk about international law is not real law. That is a still very popular perspective, because international law is the only type of law that's based on consent, right? Any other type of law, if you get stopped by a police officer and they give you a ticket for speeding, you can't say, actually, I'm not going to pay this, right? Whereas in international legal order, you have these nation states that create the laws and then choose whether or not, or to what extent they're going to follow said laws. So yes, power is an important currency in international law. And again, through my paper, I discussed that a little bit further, but I do really appreciate your perspective. One of the, I'm not saying this is my particular opinion, but one of the perspectives against this argument is, one, we don't have a very concrete definition of what law is. We have certain perspectives of what law is, but maybe international law is operating operating in a way that does constitute as law, because if the end goal is creating some form of legal order, international law is successful in that, but then again, it's open to interpretation. So is it working, and what's the alternative? If we get rid of international law, what is that alternative? So there's a lot to unpack there, but I do appreciate your perspective on international law being a valid type of law. Your second comment about the legitimacy of climate change. Again, this is a perspective that a lot of people take. And this is where I think Warlap's work is particularly important, because it's based on fact, right? Validity talks about facts, right? And we have to start accepting facts. Yes, there is exaggerated arguments, and then there are arguments that are not as not as truthful as they should be. But if we rely on said facts, then we can progress in a way where we can point to, this is the rationale of why we acted this way. This is why we've done certain things in the name of climate control. And then to your point about how certain countries are attacked over climate change, I appreciate that comment as well. And in many different regards, not just in climate change, but just about in every sphere. When a certain country does something in the name of something, be it peace, be it climate change, be it democracy, be it immigration, be it finance, there's always those that latch back and say, this is just a way for nation states to implement their national interest. Again, I'm gonna bring in Warlap frames, right? If one country's talking about climate change and the other country's talking about economic warfare, they're not looking. They're essentially using different frames, right? And they're using different frames to propel their argument forward. There needs to be a common, consistent, agreed upon frame that is going to allow these nation states to propel their argument in such a way that it's accepted. So I know that's a very small answer to a very large set of questions, but I hope that scratched the surface.
In regards to the fact, I saw a video of the Speaker of the White House that she said that we have an agreement with Google that each information related to the climate change, so it's need a proof from the White House and NASA. So it is a little bit.
Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Yes, I'm so sorry, but so we can continue the debate after the second.
Yes, thank you very much, and I'm happy to talk about this. But yes, thank you very much.
Because time is up.
Yes, and to Daniel's question very quickly, yes. So there is a confusion about what the true purpose of international law under the two perspectives that I give, and there is this deficiency of involvement from indigenous communities, right? So I was studying a particular region where they created an indigenous treaty without the involvement of indigenous people, right? So it's important to include these perspectives as much as you can, but I would go a step further as including their perspectives, including these people around the table, right? And that's when you can truly find, again, going back to the frames, it's not this game of telephone where somebody's telling a frame of a particular indigenous group. It's them having the opportunity to present their own frame and seeing where we can find mid-range universality within those contexts of those different groups. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate that you are joining us today, and we will continue, inshallah. Thank you, Ronnie, for your presenting your paper. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.